Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order the open meeting for Friday, November 3rd, 2023, and ask the Commission Secretary for information on today's agenda.
Each commissioner has independently reviewed the minutes of the open meeting of Tuesday, October 24th, 2023, and each has informed me there's no need to discuss the minutes.
I move we approve the minutes of October 24th, 2023.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Each commissioner has independently reviewed the agenda, and each has informed me there is no need to discuss the notices associated with agenda items 2 through 9.
I move we approve the notices of investigation associated with agenda items 2, 4, 5, and 6.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. And I move we approve the notices of proceeding associated with agenda items 3, 7, 8, and 9.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that moves us to agenda item 10, which is docket 5-BP-2023. So this is the broadband and digital equity planning that's coming out of the bipartisan infrastructure law. Last week, I think it was last week, we talked about the digital equity plan. This is specific to the BEAD program. The BEAD program is part of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Specifically, it provides for about $42.5 billion nationwide. And the National Telecommunications Institute, or Information Administration, which is a part of the U.S. Department of Commerce, has determined that Wisconsin's BEAD funding allocation is slightly over $1 billion. We've had a lot of talks about this. As we mentioned last week in our discussion, there's been a lot of outreach done by our broadband office and supporting commission staff. For what's in front of us today is the state of Wisconsin has to submit to the NTIA our BEAD initial proposal, and that has to be submitted to them by December 27th. And the purpose of this volume 1 of the proposal is to describe the process in which our state intends to use BEAD funding to meet the program's intent of ensuring that every resident and business has access to a reliable, affordable, and high-speed broadband connection. The initial proposal should primarily detail the process for determining which locations are eligible for funding and the competitive process that will be used to subaward implementation funding to subgrantees. This initial proposal has to be submitted in 2 parts, volumes 1 and 2, and they can be submitted together or separately. We have opted to submit volume 1 ahead of volume 2, and why this matters is because upon approval of volume 2, a 365-day subaward process is triggered. So we spent time thinking about, do we do them together or do we do them separately? And that's why we're doing volume 1 ahead of volume 2. So really, again, we did a ton of outreach. We did the Internet for All listening tour. We published our 5-year action plan for BEAD, and this has been work that has been all-consuming and has been ongoing for quite a bit of time. And the draft that was put out for comment, I think, reflects all of the work that went into it. And it also garnered a lot of comments, and comments that I appreciate and that I think make good modifications, or they present to us proposed modifications for some of this. So I'm just going to go through. I'm going to ask, similar to what I did last week, I'm going to ask that staff make some minor modifications in response to the comments that we have received. And I'm going to raise 3 specific comments in general that I think I would like to see modified pursuant to the comments that we have received. So the first one is in response to comments that we received from the WCW Broadband Alliance, Eau Claire County, Coland, and Ella Kupfer. And this relates to the list of community anchor institutions. And there were a number that were brought up in comments that I think bear incorporating into the draft that gets submitted on December 27th. And that is, so I would instruct staff to review the current list of community anchor institutions, and I would include all of those referenced in the public comments, because by no means was it our intent to leave out any of these community anchor institutions. In fact, our broadband office and I specifically continue to view those CAIs as really important partners in getting the dollars out, because when you're talking about $1 billion and where it is needed most, the best way to get those dollars out effectively is to work at a very hyper-local level. And community anchor institutions are, in my mind, a building block of that hyper-local activity. The second change I would request from our staff relates to the comments provided by Dane County, specifically as it relates to the enhanced ACAM. So enhanced ACAM was accepted during the comment period, and we heard about the locations that were going to be built with DSL in ACAM locations, and my opinion is that we should instruct our staff to modify this volume to ensure that any enhanced ACAM location that is going to be built with DSL is eligible for BEAD funding, consistent with the intent in the DSL pre-challenge modification. So that would be my second change. And then finally, and I appreciate the comments, and I anticipated the comments that were going to come on this next one. So we heard from US Cellular, we heard from WISPA, and we heard from CTIA regarding the language that we have in the draft as it relates to the licensed fixed wireless pre-challenge module. So at the end of the day, our goal is to make sure that the dollars go to where they are needed the most. And part of that is ensuring that we have the most accurate map depicting unserved and underserved locations in the state, because it all comes down to the data. So if we are looking at a map that is showing people to be served, when we know, in fact, that our own data says that they are underserved or unserved, then I think we are abandoning our responsibility, and we are ignoring locations that need the infrastructure. It's not a simple process by any means, which is why our staff has tried for years to be extraordinarily granular. This one, we got a lot of negative feedback. And what we were going to do was we were going to move wireless locations from the served definition to underserved. And again, the intent was to ensure that those locations that we know have told us they are underserved, our intent was to be able to have dollars to help those locations. We have been historically, we are, and we will continue to be technology agnostic. We do not pick winners and losers when it comes to technology. However, there are shortfalls in all situations with different types of technology. So the intent here, again, was to try to get the biggest bang for our buck, but most importantly, to serve people who we are hearing from aren't being served properly with their current technology. So I respect the comments, and I think that we can tighten it up, and we can change the language in the draft and develop a little bit more of a limited and nuanced challenge for served licensed fixed wireless providers. So that would be my direction as it relates to the fixed wireless. And I think it's also important to talk about this, and I understand why it garnered a lot of comments, but I think it's also important to remind people, as is the case with all of these proposals, this is not the last stop. We are not meeting next week to dole out the dollars. This is one this is one early step in a very long process in front of us, and it's still, wireless providers, and any provider for that matter, are still allowed to demonstrate that their current service meets the standards that are required under the federal regulations. But that being said, I'm always one for continuous improvement, and I think that those 3 comments in particular get our draft to where it needs to be. And with that being said, I guess that puts me at a new alternative 4, which is to direct staff to make these minor modifications that I just laid out. Commissioner Huebner?
Great, thank you. Yes, I agree with you on the community anchor institutions and broadening that list. I think your point on the EACAM is, I support that as well. I'll come back to fixed wireless. I had one other minor one, and that was, we had a comment from an economic development agency that is it's a nonprofit, but they said they're a 501c6, and we had limited our list to 501c3 nonprofits. So I was okay accepting that. My understanding working with staff was that the federal guidance allowed any nonprofit. So I would just slightly expand that to allow these like regional economic to be eligible challengers.
Okay.
And on fixed wireless, I think you teed it up extremely well and explained it very well, Chair. And it's important to know what we're looking at is the fixed wireless that's been built to date and whether or not it should be called served or underserved. It's not in any way talking about what we're going to build in the future or the technologies that are going to be eligible to actually meet the guidelines of BEAD going forward. Because I think one of the points that was made, and we understand this, is that technology continues to improve, as many technologies do. And so it may be the case that some new versions of that technology are going to be necessary for BEAD to reach some of our hard-to-reach places. So I just want to be very clear that it may be the case, actually, that the same locations that have fixed wireless today end up deploying fixed wireless, but a better and newer updated version of it to actually reach these customers under BEAD.
Right.
And if we call them served, then there's not going to be funding available to do those types of upgrades. So I think revisiting it is fine, and I agree with your language on that.
Okay.
So I would agree with you and just add the regional, or kind of any nonprofit to the eligible challengers, as I just said. So the economic development agencies can be part of that process.
Okay. Great. Commissioner Strand?
Thanks. I was also compelled by those substantive comments that we received on those 3 issues, so I can support those modifications, including Commissioner Huebner's modification to include the 501c6, I believe you said.
Yeah.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, so I'm gonna also add specific language, the same language that I added
Yeah.
last week, which is direct staff to finalize the document for submission to the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, with staff able to make minor non-substantive modifications to provide clarifications in response to public comments and incorporate initial feedback received from NTIA to ensure alignment with the goals and guidance provided in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and the BEAD Notice of Funding Opportunity. So that was similar to last week. And then in addition would be those very specific comments.
And just clarify 2 things, if I may, then consistent with last week, the staff will take these comments, finalize, make any other final changes. So you will not, this final will not come back for the commission to sign off again. I think we have pretty clear direction of what we need. It's an iterative process as we get that feedback. The second clarification just relates to the record for consideration. I didn't hear specific references to 2 comments that we received that were out of time. As they are out of time, they would not be included in the record, but you certainly have the discretion. But I know the chair's feeling of deadlines mean deadlines. And so I'm just confirming that those would not be considered part of the record for your determination
Yes,
here.
thank you for that. I did not consider those to be a part of the record because they did not meet the deadline.
Okay. I'm fine with that.
Okay.
I am as well, thank
Okay.
you.
Chair, I heard a motion in there. I heard everything but a motion.
How about
But
you
I'll
just
read
say
it off.
so moved?
I'll read it off. I move we direct commission staff to finalize the BEAD Volume 1 for submission to the NTIA, consistent with our discussion and with staff modifications to provide clarifications in response to public comments and incorporate any feedback received from NTIA to ensure alignment with the goals and guidance provided.
Wow, you're a fast writer.
I copied it right off the minutes from last week. Just like,
Work, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, that brings us to agenda item 11. So this is actually two different dockets combined into one. It's 9709 FG-2023 and 9714 FG 2023. So the first is our longstanding Energy Innovation Grant Program. And then the second is Energy Efficiency Conservation Block Grant. Both of these are being funded by the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act by way of a Department of Energy grant. So the first one that we will take up is EIGP. And under the IIJA, the U.S. Department of Energy was allowed to add a one-time allotment of $500 million into the existing SEP formula grant program to distribute funds to state energy offices. And then the second one is the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant, which delivered formula funding through the DOE for energy efficiency, renewable energy, zero-emission transportation, and more for local communities that don't meet the population threshold to receive a direct federal allocation. So we received an allocation of a little more than 7.8 million in formula funding that will be primarily used to support our 2023 round of EIGP. And then we also, Wisconsin received an allocation of about $2.3 million to support a single round of subrecipient EECBG grants. So what we typically do every year before we open up an EIGP grant round is we talk about whether or not we should make changes to eligibility. So specific to the eligible applicant types and the types of activities that they are allowed to propose for funding. We received a number of comments in this round as well about where we should be focusing and whether or not we should make changes. As it relates to the applicant types, I would continue to allow all eligible applicants from previous years to apply. We typically refer to that as the MUSH market, which are manufacturers, universities, schools, and hospitals, and I think that that continues to make sense. I know that this comes up every time about us prioritizing, and I will be in favor of prioritizing for the EECBG, but as it relates to EIGP, I'm not a favor of picking winners ahead of seeing the proposals. I think that's bad business. And I don't believe in dismissing something out of hand before I've seen it. So, great proposals rise to the top, in my opinion, what we've seen over the years. There are a lot of great projects that we have funded. What we continue to see is that the proposals outstrip the available funding that we have. There are a lot of innovative projects that can and should be looked at. And there are a lot of really great potential applicants who could make very good use of these dollars. So because of that, I'm just at alternative one. I would allow all eligible applicants from previous years to apply. Commissioner Huebner.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, first, just want to say, very excited about this use of our infrastructure dollars to keep the EIGP program going. It's been really a great, successful program. We've seen so many good projects. I've had the opportunity to go out in the field and see some of our projects done at paper manufacturers, some metal manufacturers, and they're just so excited about the projects they've been able to do with these grants. And obviously, we know local government, school districts, et cetera, have been able as well. So I'm in the same spot. I think that we've had great projects from a variety of applicants, and I want to keep that going. So I was at Alt 1.
Okay. Commissioner Strand.
I was as well. Thank you.
All right, the next one is eligible activity types. So we have a table on page 19 that were suggested by staff that remain, they basically remain the same. As we've seen in previous EIGP grant rounds, there's renewable energy and energy storage, energy efficiency and demand response, and then comprehensive energy planning and feasibility studies for microgrids. And then we have proposed maximum grant amounts as well that have been recommended. And so again, I think that based on the track record of EIGP and what we've seen in prior rounds, that these eligible activity types and the maximum grant requests are reasonable. So I was at Alt 1 for both of those things. The EIGP eligible activity types on page 20 of our memo, and then the EIGP maximum grant request. So I'm at Alt 1 for both. Commissioner Huebner?
I'm in the same spot. I think that we've really done a great job. We've had some lessons learned over the years, but we've gotten to a really good spot with the technologies that are eligible, the grant amounts. I really like the way we've done the planning to allow consortiums. I think we've had some really good consortium projects under that way. So all in all, I'm at the same spot, and I would be at Alt 1 for both of those.
Okay. Commissioner Strand?
I'm in the same place. Thank you.
All right. And then our final decision point on this case is available funds. So Commission staff proposes a total amount of $7.8 million. $3.4 million would be dedicated to the renewable energy and energy storage activities. $3.4 would be allocated to energy efficiency and demand response, and $1 million would be allocated to the energy planning and feasibility studies for microgrids. I am okay with this breakout. I think, again, that it reflects lessons learned in the past and where we've seen demand for these types of projects. So I'm, again, at alternative 1.
Yep, I'm out Alt 1 as well.
Thank you.
All right, so then the next is the EECBG. So again, we have to decide on eligible applicants, activities, and available funds. So for this one, there are a couple of definitions that are put out by DOE that if we decide to make changes to them, we have to go back to DOE to get approval. So the first one is how a rural community is defined. Our staff notes that different agencies and organizations use different population thresholds. For Wisconsin, we have municipal populations that range from 40 people to 577,222. So for its rural Energy for America program, the USDA defines rural as any area of a state, not in a city or town, that has a population of more than 50,000 inhabitants, not in the urbanized area contiguous or adjacent to a city or town that has a population of more than 50,000. So these USDA definitions have been used as the basis for our Focus on Energy rural programs. Then there are disadvantaged communities under the newly created Justice 40 initiative. And then there are also rural counties that are used by the U.S. Office of Management and Budget. So at a very high level, the goal of these EECBG funds are to identify disadvantaged communities and ensure that those communities are being able to avail themselves of these funds as it relates to the energy efficiency and renewable programs. So the first one option that we have is that we can establish a list of eligible applicants that include those who meet the definition of rural, but do not qualify as a disadvantaged community under the Justice 40. So it gets a little complicated. But as was the case for EIGP, I think what's most important, and the broadband, the B Volume 1, what's most important when we make these decisions at the outset is that I think we want to cast as wide a net as possible to ensure that we are capturing all potential eligible applicants and that we're not inadvertently leaving some people out. So because of that, I would adopt that suggestion, which is under Alt 1 of eligible applicant types. It's that sub-Alt A, where we would establish the list of applicants that meet the definition of rural but don't qualify as a disadvantage. And I think that is a good way of ensuring the timely use of funds and including a number of communities who might otherwise not be able to apply. So because of that, I'm at Alt 1, sub-Alt A.
Yep, I'm in the same exact spot, and I think, this EECBG, so our larger communities and larger counties and our tribes are directly getting grants from the federal government that they have to implement, but that leaves sort of everybody else. And I agree with you 100% that, to me, as wide of a net as possible among those that aren't getting a direct award, we should be allowing them to participate in this program because this is their only chance. So if we cut them out, they're going to have to go compete with how many other communities and entities federally. So I think this is an opportunity for them to get the dollars, and so I would support sub-Alt A.
Yep, okay, great. Commissioner Strand?
Thank you. So I just have a quick clarifying question. So I know you said this, and I see it in alternative 2 as well, that if we change definitions, we would have to go back. Under sub A, are you reading it as if we're approving the the DOE application and additionally establishing the list, does the list also have to go back for approval? Or do you think it's in addition to, and therefore, because we've complied with the DOE definitions, we're covered there?
I think it's the latter.
Okay.
That we wouldn't have to go back, or we would have to go back. I'm
Good
getting
question for
multiple.
Joe.
Let's check on the folks over there too.
Do you have to go back?
No.
Yeah,
not
I didn't think, yeah, correct.
Thank
The
you.
latter.
Okay,
Yep.
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, all right. Okay, next one is eligible activity types and maximal allowable requests. So we have a table on page 27 that summarizes the potential eligible activities that we could approve. It's comprehensive energy planning, renewable resource planning, and energy audits, each at $75,000. I think what this reflects is this is a relatively small budget, well, small compared to EIGP and past EIGP grant rounds that we have had. And so while I wish that we had more dollars, I do think that the activities that are being proposed and the maximum grant request amount, I do think that they are reasonable. And so I would approve the table and the maximum grant amounts that appear on page 27 and 28 of our memo. So that puts me at Alt 1 for both.
Yeah, great. And I'm largely supportive of this. One of the, I've been talking with staff a little bit about the opportunity for communities that maybe already have a plan. Can they get that new HVAC efficient HVAC system for the town hall? Can they do the insulation project? Because this, again, is kind of, for these smaller communities, this is really going to be one of the only grant opportunities they may have. My understanding is that what we're proposing to do is adopt these blueprints, and the energy audit blueprint does allow for implementation of those efficiencies. So I guess my proposal would just be that we kind of add that, the fullness of that blueprint. So it would be energy audits and building upgrades. And so it would allow some entities to go ahead and apply for an actual efficiency project under that. I would keep the 75,000, just for consistency, really.
Yeah.
But it would allow some of those smaller communities to be able to get a project that they may have had on their list for a while, go ahead and get it done. And hopefully use focus on energy incentives, along with it. So that would be my minor adjustment, and I think that would just put me at, maybe in Alt 2, would just be adding building upgrades within the energy audit sub-area.
Okay.
So that would move me to Alt 2, but I would be at Alt 1 for keeping it at 75,000 per.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
so.
I can support that. Commissioner Strand?
Yep, I can support that as well. I was initially where the chair was, but that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. All right, and then finally, it's the overall budget. Commission staff proposes a total budget of $2.3 million as shown on Table 4. And so we're just going to put it in one big bucket because we don't know what we're going to get, and it allows for more flexibility if we just have one pot of dollars, and then we're not going to set a max for each individual
Yep.
activity, so.
Yep, I support it too. I think it allows the communities to come to us where they are and propose the best project for them.
Yep.
So I think that's the right way to go. I agree with that.
Okay.
Alt 1.
Alt 1.
I'm there as well. Thank you.
All right, great.
Good. Okay. All right, I'm going to do one motion for both in docket 9709 FG 2023 and 9714 FG 2023. I move we approve the program designs and budgets for EIGP and EECBG grant programs consistent with our discussion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, as we move to agenda item 12, we're going to take a little pause to allow staff to shuffle in and shuffle out,
Sounds good.
so. We took a picture. We're ready. I powdered my nose, just like Tanner. Okay, all right. Now we move to agenda item 12, which is docket 3270-UR-125. And Commissioner Hebner has volunteered to lead the discussion for this docket.
All right, thank you, Chair. Docket 3270, UR 125, is the full rate case for applicant Madison Gas and Electric for test years 2024 and 2025. The applicant has requested an increase in its electric and natural gas rates for this period. In addition, the applicant has proposed changes to 9 separate tariff provisions, including those related to customer programs such as net metering and customer assistance, and we'll discuss those in greater detail as we go through our decision matrix today. On the electric side, the applicant indicates the increased costs they seek to recover are largely due to investments associated with purchasing a portion of West Riverside Energy Center, investment in solar projects, and MG&E's continued investments in grid modernization projects, as well as escrow accounts for uncollectible costs, COVID, transmission, and pension. And these increased costs are offset by anticipated increased sales, decreased fuel costs, and new benefits provided by the Inflation Reduction Act. The applicant initially identified an electric rate revenue shortfall of about $18 million, which would have been a 3.75% increase, and an additional $16.9 million for an additional 3.41% increase in 2025. In addition, for natural gas rates, MG&E is requesting an increase of about $6 million, or 2.56 for 2024, and then an additional $4 million for 2025. PSC staff conducted an audit of the applicant's request, and after their audit, the staff recommendation was a 1.54% increase in electric rates and a 2.27% increase in natural gas rates for 2024. And then as compared to 2023, the 2025 rates would be about a 5.7% for electric and a 7.75% increase for natural gas. So our process for going through this is really laid out in this decision matrix. First, we're going to discuss the costs that the applicant has requested to include in these test years, and ultimately that will compose the revenue requirement. It's my understanding once we get to that point, we'll take a short break to let staff kind of come up with where we're at. Then we'll switch and talk about the cost of service and allocation of those costs, as well as the various tariff modifications. MG&E filed the case on April 28th, and we had 17 different intervening parties in this case. In addition, we had over 700 written public comments, and 16 people provided statements in person or via video conference at the public hearings that were held on September 6, 2023. I want to take a moment and really thank everyone that participated in the docket. Interveners submitted a lot of testimony and contributed to us having a robust and complete record on the issues in this case. I do want to point out here, we'll be taking up rate cases for all the way till Thanksgiving, and make a note that many of these interveners were participating not only in this case, but in multiple cases simultaneously, and there was a lot of overlapping deadlines, so we just want to recognize that. The public comments, again, thank all the public commenters. A lot of comments about net metering and a lot of comments about overall affordability of the energy bills. And so those were all read and considered as part of this record today. With that, unless either of two of you have opening comments, we're ready to go through the decision matrix.
I'll just say a couple things. As you indicated, this is the first of many that we will be taking up this year. And what really struck me as I've been reading the records of all the cases is that there are two things happening very, very quickly in our industry right now. The first is there's an enormous amount of CapEx being put out by the utilities, right? So there's a lot of building that's occurring, a lot of building. And this has come up, I think, in every case. There have been comments about the level of construction that is occurring, which indicates to me that because of the level of the CapEx, that we're dealing with financially healthy utilities in our state, which we have a history of having. The second thing that came through loud and clear is that affordability is now front and center. And I think that there was a lot of testimony about different proposals and different ways that we could go about. I think WEG refers to it as a moderation cap. I think that's the term they used. Capping an increase for any given class at 6%. Then other customer groups refer to it by something else. But at the end of the day, at the core of it is that you have a lot of capital being expended by the utilities. And you have a lot of customers, whether they are low to moderate income customers, residential customers, business customers, commercial customers, who are saying we can't sustain additional rate increases. Those are the two things that came through loud and clear. And I just want to make it abundantly clear that while we have to work within the statutory confines that we have, and that there are a lot of creative solutions and ideas being put out there. Not everything that gets proposed is legal, or are we allowed to take that step. But we do have tools, and I'm prepared to use the tools that we do have, because what comes through loud and clear is this confluence of lots of capital being spent and customers across every rate class being not tired, but being almost at the inflection point. And so I do think that it is time for us to take a serious look at controlling costs. And we can continue to be a constructive regulatory environment. That word has come up a lot in this tranche of rate cases. Our state and our commission can continue to function as a constructive regulatory environment while at the same time looking out for customers of all classes, not just low to moderate income customers, not just industrial customers, but all customers. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. We have an opportunity and an obligation to do both. And so that's just sort of me setting the stage for this case and the next 4 that are coming. That's all.
I'll just say that this is my first rate case, as you guys are well aware. So I'll keep my comments much more general, but I just want to thank the staff, the applicant, and the parties. We obviously had a very, very deep and passionate record here, especially on the issues that Commissioner Huebner mentioned. And while it makes these decisions like even harder for me in terms of just close, tough calls, it really did help to be able to have all that information available in the record for us. Yeah, I'm
Great.
just curious and interested to see where the discussion goes. Thank you.
Sounds good. And I'll echo the chair's comments, and I think that's exactly why, upon Wisconsin leading the way in the country and establishing regulation for utilities, we were quickly followed by basically every state, because there's a lot of technical details, there's a lot of fact specifics, and there needs to be an entity that is specifically here to balance the various interests that are inherent in this business and in the public good that it provides to the citizens and businesses of the state. So, as Commissioner Strand said, it doesn't make our decisions easy, but it provides a very acute example of why we're here. So, based on discussion from the Commission Secretary, it's my understanding we don't have to discuss the uncontested items. So there's a number of uncontested alternatives that the applicant, the parties did not disagree on, so we will be just skipping over those in the interest of time, but they're all laid out in the decision matrix for the public to read. That brings us to issue number 4. This issue is what is an appropriate amortization period for pension and other post-employment benefit costs. What the applicant provided was that those costs were a little bit higher than usual in recent years, and so they would like to spread those costs over 4 years. We'll have a number of other questions about spreading costs over 2 years, the period of the rate case cycle. So the options here are 4 years or 2 years or another set of time. I was at alternative 1. I thought for this particular one, spreading the costs over 4 years was appropriate in this case.
I was as well, alt 1.
I was as well, thank you.
Okay. Issue 5 is uncontested. Issue 6 is what is the appropriate accounting treatment for the COVID-19 regulatory asset? That's an open meeting I'll never forget. I started on a Tuesday. We had an open meeting on a Thursday. The chair called me Friday saying, we're meeting again on Tuesday to deal with COVID. So here we are. We established my view of the COVID-19 regulatory asset. This was right when the shutdowns were starting. We were very proactive as a commission, and we went out and did 2 things. We protected customers because they needed to be in their homes. They needed access to electricity and heat and water, even if they couldn't pay in those moments because maybe they were a waiter or waitress and there's no work. And so they needed to be home with no income. This was before all of the aid came, way before. The second side is we didn't know what was going to happen to utility sales. And so we put in place these deferrals to protect both customers and the companies. That's my view. And so I'm at alternative one on this. I think that, I think there needs to be a slight wording change that, that Elizabeth pointed out is we are authorizing the recovery, not the deferral happened. So we're authorizing them to go ahead and recover this regulatory asset over 2 years. That would be my position. I appreciate the staff raising what happened in the last year's rate case and Cub pointing that out. I just feel like for us to be consistent with the purpose behind this, I was at alternative one.
Yep.
Chair.
I agree 100%, and those were really dark days. It's easy to look back in the rearview mirror with a little bit of a cavalier attitude and say, well, now this is a really great opportunity to provide savings to customers. But in my mind, that would be pulling the rug out underneath the utilities, because we made that decision, as you said, in order to 100% balance the interests of the utilities and the customers. Now, people will start stomping their feet and raising their hand and say, but that's inconsistent. In a prior case, you ordered that those amounts be written off. Well, that was because it was a result of a negotiation. And so in this particular case, there wasn't a negotiation. This isn't an issue that was proposed or agreed to by parties, and I think that it is entirely appropriate to authorize the recovery. So I'm also at Alt 1.
Oh, one, thank you.
Okay, issue 7 is uncontested, so we move to issue 8. Should the commission require the applicant to defer any impacts of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act of 2021 with or without carrying costs? So I would be here, this is if the applicant's able to sort of get a grant or some other type of program through the IIJA. And I would be at, yes, they should defer the impacts, and I would do that at short-term debt rate. And I just want to put, we don't need to change the alternative, but just, this would be like when they actually get the grant dollars is when the accrual would start, or the deferral would start, as opposed to if they get a press release that they were awarded the dollars, that they may not actually get any money until they complete a project or something like that.
Yep.
So just for clarification there, but I'm at Alt 1 with short-term debt.
I'm in
Chair.
the same spot.
Me three, thank you.
Okay, issue 9 is what is the appropriate accounting treatment for the transferability of tax credits, as well as the production tax credit amounts related to solar projects if the applicant elects PTC treatment. So we come in with, previously these have been deferred, and the applicant asked for escrow treatment. I'm going to stick with where we have been, which is a deferral on this. I think that there's just more uncertainty as to where these are going to be, as opposed to some of the escrows that we have in the past where transmission, pension, et cetera, where we have a sense of exactly what the dollars might be or the range. This, to me, seems like a deferral is most appropriate. So I'm at alternative 1.
I agree, same spot.
I agree, thank you.
Wow,
Okay.
Commissioner Strand, you're going to think that this is just easy peasy.
Okay, well, this one might be, I flag this as an interesting issue because of the many changes. So issue 10 is related to the appropriateness of authorizing deferral treatment for unexpected capacity purchased power cost caused by the uncertainties surrounding the seasonal construct within the MISO, the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator, or FERC. I think this is a really interesting issue, and I do think that we're going to have to do more work on this in years to come. I particularly think the new docket that we've opened related to reliability, I believe it's 5 EI 160, I could have that wrong, but I think that that's going to be a spot where we need to wrestle with some of these changes. The applicant identified a number of changes in their exhibit, MGE Smith 2. I'm just going to read them off. So first is the unforced capacity moving to a seasonal accredited capacity. The second is the reserve margin requirement changes. The third is a potential reliability-based demand curve in the capacity auction. The fourth is accreditation potential changes, and the fifth is possibly load modifying resources, which is like interruptible customers. no matter which one we pick, I'll be supporting that we add the words "at this time" to the end of the alternative, because I do think this is something we're going to need to revisit. I'm actually coming in at alternative 2 on this. I think that there's a number of uncertainties. We want our utilities to be planning to a reliable system, but there are some changes coming that may force them to purchase capacity from the MISO auction that are truly unexpected. I know that at this point, there's no costs in this particular one, and I know that's one of the reasons staff was supporting, or at least offering alternative 1. So I'm curious to see where you both are at, but I do think that, at least at this time, there's enough uncertainty that I would be at alt 2.
Interesting. I do not agree. I'm at alt 1. And I'm at alternative 1 for 2 reasons. Number 1, I think it's premature. And yes, there are a lot of changes, but we're also talking about highly sophisticated companies. And my concern is that if we authorize deferral, that we're removing a little bit of incentive for management to be extra cautious and precise as they manage through change. And I'm not a big fan of authorizing deferrals this far ahead of time. I mean, I just, in my mind, it is premature and it removes incentives that we should be actually reinforcing for management to make prudent decisions through change. We're all having to manage through change.
Yep.
And they are also stakeholders of MISO. So if this is going to become, a situation where everybody's pointing their finger at each other and saying, well, it's MISO's fault that costs are going up, I don't accept that premise. So I'm at alt 1.
Good reasoning, thank you.
I was actually also at alternative 1 for similar reasons. I just think it's premature, it's unknown at this time, and it doesn't preclude the utility from coming forward once the costs are known, and I think that would be a more appropriate time for this.
Yep. Great, I'll stay at alt 2, but there's a very good discussion. Okay. All right, issue 11. What percentage of industry association dues should be included in the revenue requirement, specifically for the Edison Electric Institute, the Wisconsin Utilities Association, and the American Gas Association? This comes up in basically every rate case, and staff applies, reviews the organization's 990s and looks at their websites and tax filings. There was back and forth in the record. One of the parties, Vote Solar and Sierra Club, was arguing that these should be entirely removed. CUB was supporting the disallowance related to lobbying and things that we typically are disallowing. I think this is a very interesting conversation, and I do think that is probably, I think the next issue is what should we do going forward. On this, I was at alternative 1, which is to authorize the 50% that we have historically done. So I'm at alt 1 on this one.
I am as well, and I'm just going to bundle it with 11A. So as you said, there was a lot of back and forth. There wasn't enough on the record for me to change that 50% recovery in this case, but I would recommend that staff, via a pre-filed data request in the next round of rate cases, actually shift the burden to the utility to demonstrate the benefits to ratepayers. Again, I wouldn't reject it outright, but I think this is one of those cases when if we are at a point in time where we are literally searching the couch cushion for savings and savings that we can pick up, in my mind, this is a low-hanging fruit, and we should take a look at it. And it shouldn't just be an automatic, okay, you can keep 50%. I think that we need to put the burden onto the utility to demonstrate that the recovery of these dues for associations really does provide a tangible benefit to ratepayers. So I would stop short of ordering, kind of a big generic proceeding to look at it, and I would instead say include it as a pre-filed data request. So I'm at the same spot, though. In this case, I'm at alt 1.
Okay. And then for 11A, you're at kind of neither of them, but
Right.
do it in the next rate case. That's exactly where I was at on 11A, so.
I'm in the
Commissioner
exact
Strand?
same place for both.
All right,
Okay.
okay.
Thank you, Chair. Skipping this ahead. All right, issue 12. Should the commission include the revenue requirement impact of signed collective bargaining agreements for represented employees? IBEW did provide testimony on this and talked about the value that they obviously provide, and that I think in this case, there was a signed bargaining agreement, so I was at alternative 1.
I am as well.
Same, thank you.
And then for issue 12A is there's a couple of other unions, the Steelworkers and the Office of Professional Employees International Union, that at least at the time the record was closed, that any updated signed agreement was not in the record. However, I would be at alternative 1 if those were signed prior to the decision in this rate case, which my understanding is that day is today, that those could be included.
Yeah, so that kind of puts me at alt 2, because as of yesterday, there are none. They're
None in
not
the
signed,
record.
sorry.
We're not aware of
We're
any
not
on the
aware.
record.
Right,
Yeah.
so I'm at alt 2, because they are
Okay.
not signed. Commissioner Strand?
I was at alternative 1,
Yeah,
but I understand the timing issue.
okay.
I think,
So it effectively,
I think we're all in agreement that they are not included in revenue requirement.
Because we don't have them?
Right, because the decision is and we need to prepare starting the minute after this decision
Right.
to move forward, and we do not have record evidence of it, so
Okay.
that would be that they are not included in revenue requirement.
correct. Yeah.
I think that's where we're at.
Okay.
Okay. Issue 13 is should the impacts of the West Riverside Option 2 acquisition be included in the revenue requirement in this proceeding? And we may have more in this case. We certainly have a lot more of these coming in other cases. And this just has to do really with timing, that when, we typically don't include in revenue requirement projects that we haven't yet approved. This falls into that category. So staff had taken this out. At this point, we haven't taken this docket up, so I would be consistent with where staff is, and the utility is at the same spot by the time the decision matrix rolls around, and that puts us at alternative 2. So that's where I am.
Agreed, alt 2.
Agreed, thank you.
For 13A is a sub-issue of this, and that is that if we should grant approval, should we authorize a deferral? And I would be at alternative 1 for that if we do, at some point in the next 2 years, authorize this, that we could then authorize a deferral with carrying costs at the economic cost of capital, which we could also do when that docket is actually taken up,
Yeah.
is my understanding as well. So we wouldn't have to do that today, but.
And that's where I was. I was at alt 3. I just think it's putting the cart before the horse.
Okay.
And so I wouldn't, because I wouldn't want anything to show up in the test year, right? Yeah.
Until we've authorized it.
Correct. So I'm at alt 3.
I'm at alternative 3 as well.
And I would just clarify then that it's at this time to the end of that one, much like the MISA one, that
Yep.
we aren't prohibiting a request for a deferral. I will note that currently in that BS filing, that has been made, a specific request for a deferral has not been made, so perhaps the applicants in that docket may want to consider modifying or supplementing that application in light of your discussion.
That was very generous of you. I don't hear about it.
Okay. The next set of issues, 14, 14A, 15, 15A, and 16 relate to force majeure changes to 3 solar projects, the Badger Hollow 2, the Paris Solar Farm and Battery Energy Storage System, and the Darien Solar Energy System. So in September of 2023, the applicant filed a force majeure change for all 3 of these projects. They were different filings. Due to the late timing of the force majeure filings, our commission staff has not yet reviewed and analyzed those requests, and therefore didn't include any costs related to force majeure in this particular case at this time. My approach on this is really to, and staff teed this up in their testimony, is that these projects aren't done yet. And so it may be more appropriate for us to look at these at the end when the project's completed as opposed to piecemeal along the way. So that's going to be kind of consistent throughout my, my thinking here. So for issue 14, I would be at alternative 2, and that would be defer the force majeure cost to a future proceeding.
I agree. I'm in the same spot, and it has nothing to do with whether or not the activities meet the legal definition of force majeure. It has everything to do with exactly what you just said, and it's premature. And I don't know, we need to make, just because you say it's force majeure doesn't mean that then every 11 item, all 11 items underneath that you're lumping into that bucket are directly attributable to the force majeure event. There could be indirect or tangential relationship between the force majeure. So it's not as simple as we're going to claim force majeure and then this is the bucket. We have to be able to look at the bucket and we have to make sure that those costs are directly attributable. And so I think it's premature, and that's why I'm at alt 2.
I'm in the same place for the same reasons. Thank you.
Issue 14A is somewhat related. So because the force majeure filing and because of some of the challenges getting certain materials, the in-service date for these Badger Hollow 2 in this case is changing. My position on this is to be at alternative 1, to defer the incremental revenue requirement impact so that the rates actually reflect the in-service dates of the facility. So that's alt 1 for me.
Agreed. Alt 1.
Agreed.
Okay, and then 14A is that since we did do the second one of this, what carrying costs should be authorized, and I was at alternative 1.
Okay, so we're deferring both, right? All right, so.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, we did both.
So we're
I'm
doing
sorry.
both. Yeah, okay. All right, I just want to make sure.
I lost track, thanks.
I would actually have an alt 3. I would create my own alt 3, and that would be that I would authorize carrying costs for the change to the in-service date, but I would not authorize carrying cost for the force majeure. And that's because of the potential impact to customers, right? So
Yep.
I think you all have heard me say this before. When we authorize a deferral, we're essentially creating an IOU that then becomes due from customers. And my opinion is that we should not add to that IOU by authorizing carrying costs. So as it relates to the force majeure costs, I would not authorize carrying costs. But when you're talking about the delay in service, it could actually have the opposite result. It could result in a reduction
Yeah.
to customers, and in that case, I think customers should benefit. And that's consistent with how we've treated other issues in the past, specifically storm damage.
Yep.
So
I'm gonna
because of
join
that,
you.
I'm at, alt 3, so I'll split
No,
it.
I think that's better. I'll
I
join
think
you
that's an
there.
important distinction, and I
Yep.
support that as well. Thank you.
Short-term debt, yeah.
At short-term debt?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I'll join you there. Thank you. Okay, so issue 15, we move on to the Paris Solar and Paris Battery Storage. I think for the same reasons, I'm in the same spot. The project is not completed, so I would defer the force majeure cost increase to a future proceeding, alternative 2.
Agreed, alt 2.
Alt 2.
So 15A is the same as 14A, this time for Paris, and that would put me at alternative 1.
Agreed, alt 1.
Alt 1.
And then for 15A, sub-issue I, is the carrying costs related to the Paris side, so I would do the same exact thing that you just recommended, a new alternative 3.
Okay, great, that's where I am.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. Issue 16 is Darien, and I would be at, I was here at an alternative 3, which is to say defer to a future proceeding on this too, that alternatives were either authorize or do not, and I'm in the same spot. We don't have enough information.
Yeah, so this one, I think, as it was described to me, there's late and then there's super late, and this falls in the super late category. Such so that staff didn't even have an opportunity to put evidence on the record to suggest that we
Yeah.
defer.
Yep.
So because of that, I'm at alt 2. I wouldn't authorize it
Okay.
at all. And again, the utility's not precluded from making a filing with us asking that those costs be deferred. They're well within their right to do that. I just don't think it's appropriate, given what we have, or
Oh, that's a good point.
better said, don't have on the record.
Yeah.
So for this one, I'm at alt 2.
I'm at alternative 2 as well.
Okay, no, that makes sense. I'll join you there. Okay, switching gears. Issue 17. Now we got contagious coughs now. No, I'm good.
Do you want an Altoid too?
Issue 17, should incentive compensation information be available if not included in the revenue requirement? We're going to hear a lot more about incentive compensation next week on the schedule, I believe, with some other rate cases. This particular utility does not have any incentive compensation in their compensation that ratepayers are paying. So it's really a policy question that Cub's asking for, in my view, is that we still want to know, Cub still would like to know what incentives are kind of behind the scenes. That's the way I took this. The way I'm at least for today, is I would be at alternative 2. And I would, if they're not going to include it in a revenue requirement at this time, I would not require them to provide that information in a rate proceeding.
I agree. Alternative 2.
I'm in the same place as well.
Issue 18 is, should the applicant be allowed to earn a return on a portion of the QIP, which is the construction work in progress? Walmart had testimony on this. Their witness, Cronauer, expressed concern for this. The applicant's witness and our staff in our briefings explained to me that this is, Walmart may have it slightly confused or different based on the fact that this gentleman's probably testifying in about 49 other states in utility rate cases. So the way we do it is slightly different, that the QIP does not go into rate base. They do earn a return on a portion of QIP, and that's traditionally how we've done this. Staff has audited this, as we said, so I would be at alternative 1.
Agree, for all the reasons you stated. Alt
Okay.
1.
Yep, in the same place.
Okay, issue 19 is an uncontested item, but we're switching to the customer conservation budget. Issue 20 is, what is the appropriate 2024 conservation budget? Our witness, again, audited this. This is Mitch Horry. He's our expert on this, and audited those numbers and supported alternative 1, that this is a reasonable budget, and that's where I am, alternative 1.
I'm in the same spot.
Yeah.
Alt 1.
Alt 1, thank you.
Yeah, I'll just respond because I just noticed this, that one of the interveners, Blacks for Political and Social Action, did suggest that this should be increased. We'll talk about those programs later, but kind of consistent with the way we've treated Riverside and some of the others, like we don't include in revenue requirement programs that we haven't authorized yet. So just wanted to respond to that intervener. Issue 21 is uncontested, and issue 22 is the conservation budget for the 2025 year. Again, staff has audited this, and it is appropriate from their view. So I'm at alternative 1.
I'm in the same spot.
Okay.
I am as well.
Okay, issue 23 is uncontested. Issue 24 is also uncontested. And at this point, we switch gears slightly into the fuel. So as part of each rate case, when they come in, typically we are also conducting the fuel case inside of the rate case. And so the next few issues have to do with those issues. Staff identified a number of proposed adjustments to the applicant's monitored fuel costs. At the end of the day, the applicant did not contest these. And so issue 25, although there's 19 sub-issues, is actually uncontested. There's a lot happening here, but it's not ultimately a contested issue.
Agreed.
Yep. So we move on to issue 26, and that is, what is the appropriate assumption for Columbia Rail? That's also uncontested, excuse me. Issue 27 is that our staff, Mike Ritzema, has filed his Exhibit 2, updating all the costs. including transmission, and that is also uncontested. The change, just for the public record, was a change of $428,828, so about 0.55% on the fuel side, so a relatively minor change. That brings us to another subsection, finance issues. Issue 28 and 28A. Issue 28 is what is an appropriate cost of capital, and issue 28A is what is a reasonable return on equity for the test years. Looking ahead slightly to the equity layer, which is 29, and we will come back to that, but just to point out that at this point, the applicant has a 55% equity layer. That is uncontested, essentially, as we get to that. And the question in front of us here is, what's the appropriate return on equity? Again, we saw a really robust testimony on this, and want to thank both staff and Cub in particular for their robust analysis of this, as well as our staff. So the staff identified, based on their 5 different analyses that they run, a reasonable range of 8.46 to 9.84%, with a midpoint of 9.15%. The applicant has come in with a 9.8% ROE and has suggested or applied to keep that. Staff has suggested to slightly reduce that to 9.7%, and Citizens Utility Board has suggested, proposed to move that down to 9.3%. This is obviously a hotly contested and hotly watched issue. For me, based on the 55% equity layer that this utility has, I'm comfortable with staff's recommendation to slightly reduce the ROE to 9.7% based on the analysis that they have run, based on the range that they found. So I'm at alternative 2 is where I come in at.
Okay. So I was wanting to take this up along with issue 30.
Okay.
And issue 30 is the earnings sharing mechanism. And I'll cut to my punchline, and that is, I think we have to do one of these things. We have to either make a meaningful reduction in the applicant's ROE, or we have to require an earnings sharing mechanism. I don't think we can do both. And so I was prepared to come in. My understanding is that for every 10 basis points, we would reduce the ROE. It equates to $1.15 million for 2024 and $1.3 million in 2025 rates. So I was prepared to do either or, make a meaningful reduction in ROE, or require an earnings sharing mechanism. I have my own personal thoughts on what I think is better for customers, but I would be interested, I'm interested to hear in Commissioner Strand's position on ROE.
So this was a tough call for me, and I appreciate the discussion regarding equity layer and ESM, because I think those are important components of the capital structure. But not to bury the lead, I was with Commissioner Huebner at 9.7.
Okay.
And Chair, I'd love to hear what your thinking was, because I was, well, maybe we can come back to that?
Yeah,
Do you want to
okay.
come back and
Yep.
work through the rest of this? And
Yep.
then, once we get to cost, we'll just, okay. So we'll put a pin in that. 28B is short-term borrowing. What's the reasonable interest rate for the applicant's short-term borrowing? The only number on the record was 4.40%, so I'm at alternative 1 to adopt that.
Agreed, alt 1.
Yep.
And 28C is the applicant's forecasted long-term debt. Again, the applicant was at 4.67, and there's no opposition to that. There's no other number in the record, so I'm at alt 1.
Agreed, alt 1.
Alt 1.
And then 29 is what is a reasonable capital structure for the applicant. They currently have a 55% equity layer. There's no specific number besides that in the record. But Cub would support a deeper look at this, which we'll talk about next. But based on the record that we have, 55% is reasonable because there's no other substantial evidence for a different number. So I'm at alt 1.
Agreed, alt 1.
Alt 1.
Okay. And 29A is should the applicant be required to engage in a collaborative study of capital structure. I look forward to the discussion on this. This is something that can come up in every rate case. I expect it to come up. I would expect that parties, and CUB in particular, if they plan to look at this in the future, can and should bring whatever evidence that they have. So my approach was not necessarily to direct that a collaborative study happen, but rather to just expect that this is maybe going to be a contested issue in a future case and get ready
Right.
for it ourselves. So I didn't have any direction that I wanted to give, except for, I do agree, if you want to contest this issue, we can certainly take it up. So,
I'm in the same spot. My thought was a collaborative study means put testimony on the record. We don't need to collaborate on it. If it's something that needs to be examined, and they do note that there was a 2016 order point, and that order point was satisfied.
yeah.
And so I don't see any need to order something further. I would just include it in testimony the
Yep.
next time around.
And I think one of the things, and this may be another issue, is CUB seems to be concerned they might not get the data. And so I think that's an issue that maybe we can take up as an evidentiary issue. If they're doing data requests and can't get the numbers that they need to be able to crunch numbers, then we can take that up, or the ALJ can take that up as it happens. But I wasn't prepared to go with that far today, so.
Agreed.
I'm in the same place. I would
Okay.
like more information about this in the future. I'm glad we didn't try to do anything crazy this time, given that lack of information.
Yeah.
But it's important to continue working on this issue.
Yep. Okay, that brings us to issue 30, and that, as previewed by the chair, is should an earnings sharing mechanism be imposed by the commission? Just some background on this issue before we jump in. Over the previous number of years, the earnings sharing mechanism has been a part of various settlements with many utilities. Most of our investor-owned utilities, I think, have had this at one point or another or do today. This particular utility had never had an earnings sharing mechanism. The question is whether we should impose that. Staff proposed a structure that would be outlined in Alternative 2, and that would be that the applicant would retain the first 15 basis points of earnings above the authorized ROE. Then the applicant and customers would evenly split the next 60 basis points, and then customers would receive a full refund of all earnings above 75 basis points. There are some other structures. I think we'll see those next week, where it's 25, 50, and 25 as opposed to 15, 60, and 25. Again, based on the holistic balance, my approach was going to be to, yes, impose this, and I would use the structure that was provided in the record by staff, and that would be under Alternative 2, the 15, 60, 75, but look forward to your discussion.
Okay, great. I'm in the same spot. So I'm a big fan of earnings sharing mechanism. I think they represent a win-win-win. And I think, as I previewed in my comments at the outset, we have got to start utilizing the tools that we have available to us to help mitigate or eliminate rate increases. We have to. And as I also previewed, increased CapEx on the behalf of our investor-owned utilities demonstrates that they have adequate ROEs. That is a factual statement. If they didn't have adequate ROEs, they wouldn't have the ability to make the large financial capital outlays that they are all in the process of doing. So I think that earnings sharing mechanisms represent a really rational, reasonable approach to trying to mitigate rate increases. And I, in particular, really appreciated Steve Kime's testimony on the ROE piece of this. And as I indicated, I was prepared to do one or the other. So if you both are comfortable with a 9.7 ROE and implementing an earnings sharing mechanism, I can join you. Because if we weren't going to require an earnings sharing mechanism, then I was prepared to move to a lower ROE. So I'm okay with a 9-7 and requiring them to implement the earning sharing mechanism, and I would do it the way that it's laid out in alternative 2.
So I was at alternative 2. I absolutely think that an ESM is appropriate here. Like you said, I think it's one of the tools that we have to try to find that balance that we're all seeking. So,
Yep.
Are we going to take a break now or not?
Yes. Yes, we could take,
10?
10. She said 10.
okay,
10.
let's
Let's split the difference. Go 15.
let's come back at 12.
Okay.
05.
All
15-minute
right.
break.
We're going to take a 15-minute break.
Yep.
All right, we're back from our break.
All right, so we're going to continue discussion of the Madison Gas and Electric rate case for 2024 and 2025. Before the break, we were able to get through what we call the revenue requirement, and at the end of the day, it's quite similar for both electric and gas to what the staff percentage is. So if you're following along decision matrix, the staff numbers are going to be fairly close as we figure out now how to split up the revenue requirement among the different customers in their classes. So issues 31 to 33 relate to the cost of service study for electric, and they pertain to determining the appropriate cost of service study that we're going to look at, and then we're going to look at how to allocate the revenue across. So for issues 31 and 32, it's the same question for 2 different years, and that is which electric cost of service study or study should the commission consider when allocating revenue responsibility. The first is for the 2024 and the second is for the 2025. Really appreciated the additional information from this case that maybe what we've seen in past, specifically from the back and forth between Cub and WIG. I thought the Cub witness Singletary is making a lot of really good points related to cost of service. At the end of the day, I'm at alternative 2 on both of these in that I'm looking at all, and there was ultimately 9 provided in the record, different cost of service studies to get to my revenue allocation choice. So I'm at alt 2 for both of those, and then we'll talk about issue 33 next. So for issues 31 and 32, I'm at alternative 2.
I'm at the same spot, and I will just reiterate your comments. Even as somebody who thoroughly enjoys this type of exercise, I found this particular case's testimony on cost of service to be really instructive, and it makes me wonder if it's not worth re-examining the traditional cost of service method. And that's one of the reasons why we opened the PBR docket, right, was to look at, are there alternative ways to make rates, given that we are entering a different paradigm in terms of the generation portfolio, what that looks like, and the behavior of customers, and specifically how and when they are consuming. It's a lot different now than it was in 1907. And so reading the testimony, while I'm not prepared to adopt a range in this case, I think that might make sense in the future. And I'm wondering if maybe we either do that in future rate cases or if we take a look at re-examining cost of service in our generic docket. But I'm at alt 2 for this
Okay.
case.
I'm at alt 2 on both as well, for
Okay.
the same reasons, and I did appreciate the testimony on this, and look forward to see kind of where we go on
Yeah.
cost of service going forward. Thank you.
So I think you previewed this a little, Chair. Issue 33 is really pointing out, is it reasonable for us to open an investigation into electric cost allocation and rate design principles? Curious where you both are at on this. I thought, at the very least, the next rate case, we need to peel the onion apart a little more. We're arguing about generation plant. Well, there's different types of generators.
Right.
There's baseload plants, intermediate plants, peaker plants. It may be the case that all of those aren't allocated the same. In this particular case, I thought Cub made an excellent point that the particular largest customer in this utility simultaneously is interruptible, and so maybe you're not building generation for their peak, but their load factor has to be 90%. So they're basically on almost all the time. So how do we square that? I think it's an open question. The cost of service studies that we have may not be actually disaggregated enough to help us answer some of these more detailed questions. So as I look ahead, the 3 things that stuck out to me was looking at the different types of production plants and whether those should be split differently, baseload, intermediate, peakers. WIG said, we're not opposed to some sort of production or demand versus energy split for some of the production, but they just thought the way that it's being done today isn't the optimal. So I'm open to looking at that. They called it the average and excess method that they thought was more accurate, so I would put that on the table as an option to be looking at. And then this particular utility did at the end, or throughout the course of the proceeding, identify the renewables. I think looking at the renewables as well, how we're going to treat that. And they did have a treatment of 50% demand and 50% energy for solar, and 10% demand and 90% energy for wind. I don't have any issues with that split where I sit here today, but I think as the system goes to more and more renewable, figuring out how that's going to be split is going to be a more and more important question. So open to your thoughts. I want to hear if you think this is something we need to have an investigation on, or if it's just another thing that we do need to investigate. And this is another one where CUB, I think, wants us to take that step so that they can be sure we get the data and that they can get the data. So wanted to see where you're at on that.
I definitely think it needs more investigation, and we've been pretty clear in the last few rate cases that because the way generation has changed and consumption has changed and the makeup of the types of generation, that it necessitates that we look at how costs are allocated. And so I just didn't know, does it make sense to reopen 5 EI 137? Is that an option, or do we fold it into the existing roadmap docket? But I'm all in favor of taking a look at it. And I do agree with CUB that our goal should be to narrow the set of cost of service models that we're looking at. I think that if we can become more specific and more granular at the cost of service models, I think it's only going to benefit customers in the end. And I would love to hear more from Wisconsin Industrial Energy Group. I think, as you indicated, that they, proposed a couple of different things, but I would love to hear more robust discussion from WIG on this issue. So I'd be in favor of either opening something brand new or folding it into an existing docket. It might be cleaner to open up a brand new investigation just to be sure that it doesn't get dragged down, and that it can kind of proceed on its own path. So I'd be in favor.
Your thoughts?
Thanks. I'm strongly supportive of reviewing this and hopefully updating it. I was going to stop short of ordering a formal investigation, but I don't know a ton about the existing dockets either, so I'd be open to
Yeah.
both of those things.
Why don't we put a pin in this and come back at the end and
Okay.
maybe get some staff guidance on what they think would be the best way forward? Robust discussion. Thank you. That leads us to issue 34, and that is what is the appropriate electric revenue allocation for the 2024 test year? The applicant had put forward their initial allocation. Commission staff used a slightly different allocation when they allocated it. It was at also a lower percentage increase. The final number is slightly different, but looking at the commission staff, it's going to be relatively similar to the 1.54% that we're looking at for 2024. WIG had a different proposal, which would have, again, based on their view of the cost of service studies and which ones they weighted more heavily, they would reduce the multiple classes, CP1, SP3, and lighting, and put a bigger increase on residential. From the cost of services that I looked at, and again, I took into account all of them, but I think the points made by both WIG and CUB were both strong. And I thought that staff actually provided a very appropriate balance when I looked at how the different costs of services would have shifted costs for some classes versus others, and how you balance the ones that I thought were most impactful, and it really gets very close to where staff is for some of the particular advocates that were in the case. So I was at alternative 2.
All right, I'm in the same spot, and I'll just reiterate what I said at the outset, and that is that Weeks' proposal included a moderation cap of 6%, and I think it just bears repeating that customers calling for moderate increases is not just on the residential side. You see it on the industrial side as well. And I don't want that to go unnoticed, because I think sometimes in the public discourse, it's been twisted as though, you know, we're only concerned about one class of customers, and that is not true. We look at the cost of service, and then we make decisions how to allocate those costs appropriately. And in this case, I agree, I'm at Alt 2.
Thanks. I was also at all two. I think the staff took a really balanced approach in allocating and following kind of the general direction of the cost of service study results that were used, while minimizing the impacts to specific classes. And I just echoed the chair's sentiments regarding it's not just residential that we're looking at here. Thank you.
Issue 35 is the appropriate electric revenue allocation for the 2025 year. And for most of the same reasons I discussed, I'm at the same spot, and that's alternative 2 with the staff revenue allocation.
Agreed, Alt 2.
All two. Thank you.
Issue 36 is what is the appropriate overall electric rate design for the 2024 test year. So with the allocations split to each class has a rate design. For like residential and smaller classes, it's typically just a customer charge and then an energy charge. For the larger customers, they also have demand charges. At the end of the day, I'm at alternative 2 again, which would accept staffs. It's quite similar in principle to where the applicant was at. And so I thought that was a balanced approach, alternative 2.
Agreed, Alt 2.
Alternative two. Thank
Okay.
you.
Again, issue 37 is the same question for the next test year, 2025. I'm at the same spot, alternative 2.
Agreed.
Same. Thank you.
Okay. Then issue 38, what is the appropriate fuel surcharge rate from January 1, 2024 through September 30th, 2024? This is a little bit of a holdover from the fuel reconciliation case that we took up earlier this year. There remains some of the fuel to be collected. It has to be divided by the sales, which we've now set the sales forecast earlier in this discussion. So I'm at alternative 1, and that is to accept what staff has calculated.
Agreed, Alt 1.
Alt one.
Okay.
Thank you.
Issue 39 is, and multiple issues after it, is related to net metering. This issue probably got the most attention of any other issue in this case. We heard voluminous testimony from various parties, local governments, advocacy groups, et cetera, and also hundreds of public comments weighing in on this issue. I think it's a very interesting back and forth, obviously, but at the end of the day, for this particular application, I would not accept or not support the company's approach to closing their PG2 tariff. As I really read the record, the points that came out strongest to me were related to the need for analysis and studies. First proposed, this was a subsection of one of the witnesses' testimonies. Later on rebuttal, there was a new proposal. Many interveners, responded, well, we only had 3 days to analyze that. I don't think that that's substantial evidence or the way to approach changing this. I think that we need to see the analysis and the studies about the cost to serve or some kind of benefit cost analysis. The Vote Solar witness produced the best that he could do. The applicant said, we reran the numbers and didn't find the same thing, but didn't actually provide what they did find. And I think that's the type of data and granularity we're going to have to get to, in my view. On the other side, we did see substantial evidence that customers across the board utilize this tariff, from local governments to residential, et cetera. So as it relates to 39A, I am at alternative 3, and I would not authorize the proposal to close PG2, and I would not create a SIP pilot.
I'm in the exact same spot. It almost felt as though it was half-hearted. It was a half-hearted proposal. And so I didn't feel that there was enough information to support authorizing it. And I suppose it's jumping ahead a little bit, but I would actually direct them to go back to 5 EI 157 and use that docket to address not just what they want to do with their PV tariffs, but look at net metering in general. We've started down the path of looking at net metering. Staff has put together information. And I think based on the information that was put into the record about the need for Wisconsin to have a consistent approach to net metering, I would not approve the applicant's proposal to close this tariff and create the new SIP pilot. I would have them come back to 5 EI 157 and do a more robust analysis of if they want to change something or if they want to add something, put it in there. But I wasn't persuaded.
Okay.
I'm also at alternative 3 and feel strongly that more study and analysis is needed, like you
Yep.
said.
Okay. So we're going to peel apart a couple of the sub-issues here then. 39B is the applicant's proposal to create a supplemental experimental SIP2 pilot reasonable. I'm at alternative 3. I didn't see that this was a cost-based or sort of an incentive that was based on a cost-effectiveness test, and that's the way that we do it with Focus on Energy and other programs like that. So I was at alternative 3.
Agreed, all three.
All 3.
Issue 39C is the applicant's proposal to create PGHE reasonable. I was also at alternative 3 here. I don't think there was substantial evidence. In particular, they proposed a 5 cent per kilowatt hour item that was, I didn't find that to be based in any cost analysis that was provided. So I'm at alternative 3.
Agreed, all three.
And then 39D, is it appropriate for the commission to
Wait,
order?
what about Commissioner Strand?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I was
I'm
going to
so
let you go,
sorry.
but I'm at all 3 as well. Thank you.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Right. Stop.
Okay, 39D?
Yep.
Okay. Is it appropriate for the commission to order an investigation into the appropriate tariff structure for parallel generation customers? I thought the best evidence on this was provided by, numerous parties, but I think that the specific recommendations from Mr. Robigo, focusing on a cost-benefit analysis or evaluation-based approach, and he put in the National Standard Practice Manual, which we use for energy efficiency within Focus, and now they have a new manual for the cost benefit of DERs, that might be a really good starting point for us. So I don't know if you were thinking, Chair, that you were interested in us, like alternative 1, us kind of taking that action to move docket 5 EI 157 along, or if you're more in a take no action at this point, and
Nope, I'm moving right along.
so you would do alt 1?
Yep.
Okay. And then, so for me, I had the additional topics. I would do the cost benefit and valuation-based approach. Were the two that I highlighted there. I don't know if you had others that you wanted to look at 157.
Nope. I
Okay.
can support that.
I'm sorry, the cost benefit of the CBA, were you at the VOS as well, or just the CBA?
And/or, yep. So I think we should look at those options and see what's appropriate for
Right, have
us.
them bring information for both.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep, I'm okay with that too. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry. And just to be clear, so if we're advancing that, it would be not only, it would be open to anybody, right? So, it's a generic docket. We'd move
Yeah.
those two topics along, but, certainly MG&E as well as any others that want to comment on that are able to participate while we're talking about it specific here, since we're doing it in the generic. Just wanted to make sure that
Correct.
that's consistent with your intent.
Yes.
It
It's
is.
a broader discussion.
It's a
Right, it's
generic
open to
docket.
anybody. Yep.
And we would continue. Okay. Okay, issue 40 is electric vehicle public charging experimental pilot EV2, and are the applicant's proposed changes to this tariff reasonable? At the high level, the applicant is proposing to change from charging by time at the charger, specifically $5 per hour, to a energy rate. The city of Madison also supported this. A number of parties had observations but didn't really take a position. Renew opposed this, saying it would be anti-competitive. For this particular tariff, I am actually at alternative 1. I would authorize the changes. I think that the testimony from the applicant and from the city of Madison describing how different vehicles are able to get more fuel in that same amount of time, I mean, it makes sense that they would be charged for the amount of fuel that they're actually using and the amount of energy that they're using. And so I'm actually okay with this, and I would be at alternative 1.
Okay, so I just want to address Renew's argument. They say that it's an unfair competitive advantage, but we're talking about a regulated monopoly. So this isn't the fair market that we're talking about. This is a regulated monopoly, and contrary to their assertion, it's been made abundantly clear to us by a number of parties that they feel that utilities are the only entities that are allowed to charge a KWH rate, which is why there's been legislation proposed to allow anybody to charge on a per KWH basis. So I think conflating a competitive marketplace with a regulated monopoly is the wrong legal analysis. I would authorize the changes to this program, but I would actually keep it as a pilot, and I would collect more data. We asked for data, and based on my discussions with staff, the data that we received wasn't very fulsome. And I think the reason given was because there just wasn't enough information at the time. So I'm actually not prepared to flip it to permanent. I would keep it as a pilot program, and I would require that we get more data. Clearly, from our perspective, the fact that the tariff, as it's drafted, the rates aren't recovering the cost of the program is the biggest red flag. And we need to ensure that the rate covers the cost for the applicable customers that are taking service under the rate. So I'm at Alt 2. I would authorize the changes, but I would keep it as a pilot, and I would require more data to be filed with the next rate case to assess whether or not this modification brings it to a point where it's recovering its costs. Commissioner Strand.
So I was also at alternative 2. I feel strongly that, like you said, we need more transparency here. I think we need to know information about the current expenditures, the planned public charging expenditures, and how those are recovered by the public charging rates, and I just didn't see that here. So Alt 2 with filing made as next rate case with more of that information that we're seeking.
And would you keep it as a pilot, or would you flip it to permanent?
I hadn't considered keeping it as a pilot, even though it was offered by by commission staff. So I'm okay either way.
Okay.
But if that's the direction that we're going in, as long as we get more information, I'm okay with pilot status continuing. It seems appropriate.
Okay.
I'll join you at that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are you good with the pilot? All good with the pilot.
Pilot.
And just to clarify, so authorize with modifications to continue as a pilot and require that additional data be submitted in the next rate case to assess whether the tariff as modified is recovering its costs.
Right, and did you have additional data that you wanted?
I was seeking a schedule that clearly identifies the current expenditures, the planned EV public charging expenditures, and information detailing how those are recovered by the public charging rate. So I think you have it.
Okay.
YouTube has it. Good transparency. Okay, issue 41 Is Walmart's proposal to require the applicant to develop a new commercial public-facing EV charging tariff reasonable? Walmart was proposing that they are building more public charging stations and would like a tariff that is particular to that type of customer or that type of application. And I actually think this is a good idea. I think I'm at alternative one. I think that the applicant should work with Walmart and others to develop a specific proposal, because I think there's going to be potentially dozens or hundreds of these. And there's, I think, a lot of evidence out there that states that are further along on this have done this, particularly because there's a mismatch between maybe the current tariffs that are available for commercial customers versus specific usage patterns of an EV charger. So I think that this is actually appropriate.
Yeah, and coming into it, I was leaning towards alt 3 and was maybe hoping that progress could be made on the legislative front. And so I'm not quite prepared to go to alt 1 just yet. I'm going to stay at alt 3.
I was at alternative 3 as well, for the same reasons.
Good points. Yeah, I'll stay where I am, but good points. Okay, issue 42 is related to the Energy Customer Assistance Program, and I would recommend that we take that up consistent with issue 57, where the BPSA has multiple customer assistance program proposals as well.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so that brings us to issue 43. Are the applicant's proposed changes to the bring your own device tariff reasonable? This would expand the availability to some commercial customers, broaden the language on when typical events occur, revise some other language. I think importantly is the last bullet, which is potentially adding water heaters, both electric resistance and electric heat pump water heaters. I was supporting this. I think that the CUB has asked that a report come forward on the performance and costs and benefits. I do believe that we received a report on this in the past. It may behoove us to get more data in the future. These types of demand response programs, more generally, figuring out how much they cost compared to building something new is important. I do think that is the right metric that these programs should be evaluated against, is what's the cost to build capacity versus what's the cost to save energy on peak. So I think keeping that linkage is really important. I had an extremely minor point that I wanted to make on the tariff language. So because this is today only cooling systems, they have something they call a controlled pre-cooling. And because now they want to add more technologies, they want to call it a preemptive event adjustment. And that, I just wanted to point out, I don't have a problem with that in a tariff, but I don't know as a customer that they're going to know. That seems like a very vague jumble of words to be so just, I don't know if the tariff needs to change, but probably the customer marketing preemptive event adjustment may not be
The best choice of
the best choice. I don't know. So I don't know if you had thoughts on that in the actual tariff itself. Otherwise, I was okay with alt 1 or alt 2 adding the report that CUB is talking about. So curious to see where you're at.
I was at alt 1. I was not going to require
Okay.
additional modifications or reporting. And I have to be honest, I did not pick up on that
No problem.
vocabulary.
I was at alt 1 as well, but great
Okay.
catch on the wording.
I'll be at alt 1, and then we'll just accept it, but it's out there now. If they want to adjust that so their customers know what that means, they can take that back. Sound good? Okay. Issue 44 is the applicant's proposed changes to the residential and business renewable energy programs, together marketed as Green Power Tomorrow. Essentially, what they want to do here is have the difference between MG&E's base mix of renewable energy and getting up to 100%. So that, for example, if the company's at 25% renewable energy, a customer would just be on 75% GPT, green power tomorrow, in order to get to the 100%. I thought that was okay. I think that I was at alternative 2 here, which CUB explicitly says, and then the applicant alludes to the idea of working with commission staff to ensure information appropriately reflects the program. So whether that's alt 1 or alt 2, I think working with staff on the language is a fine kind of resolution to this, because CUB did raise some points about the language that was being used, so.
I agree. I didn't have any problem with the proposed changes. I think in general, as utilities look to offer new tariffs and programs in response to consumer requests, it would behoove all of the utilities to take a really hard look at their marketing materials. I can tell you, just based on my own experience with bill inserts that I receive, I work for the commission, and I have a hard time understanding some of the language that's in the bill insert. And so as consumers become more sophisticated, and I would argue more interested in the tariff offerings from utilities, I think they all should take a harder look at the information that they're sending to customers, because it can be really technical, and as you pointed out in the last tariff, it can be really difficult to understand. And at the end of the day, the utility should be a trusted partner, and they should be providing information that is clear and easy to understand. So I don't have any problem with the changes. I would agree that they should work to review the materials.
I was at alternative 1, so, I mean,
Yeah.
if that means 2 for the modification, I'm okay with that. I just, like the chair said, I think plain language is important, thinking of it from the perspective of the customer and not from,
Yep.
you know, the engineers who
Right.
are creating these things is very important. Thank you.
Right.
Okay.
Sorry, so you were fine, Commissioner, with the addition, work with staff to ensure information appropriately reflects the program?
Thank you.
Issue 45, should the commission approve any remaining uncontested electric rate design proposals? I did not have any problems with this, so this relates to general street lighting, backup generation, a change at the West Campus cogeneration facility at UW-Madison, renewable flat bill pilot expansion, and some changes to the electric vehicle managed charging rewards rider. I did not identify any changes that I would want to make, so I'm at alternative 1.
Agreed. Alt 1.
Alt 1, thank you.
Issue 46, should the commission approve any additional electric tariff modifications or conditions identified in the record but not yet talked about here? For this one, I was at, I think, alternative 1, and specifically the time of use piece that the CUB witness brought up, and the applicant is willing to work on that for a digital signature option and looking at the frequently asked questions. So that was one item identified, that I identified, I think that they should work on. The fixed charges, I continue to be open to it. I don't think we need to order that. I think it's going to come up in every case, but in this particular case, I didn't have substantial evidence. There was certainly a comparison of different ways to bucket the fixed charges. If that's an issue that parties want to bring up, you know, they need to bring a complete record on that for us to look at.
I agree.
Chair?
I wouldn't add anything other than the time of use
Okay.
changes that you indicated.
I can join you guys there. I thought it would be helpful for the IRA piece, just because these are new
Oh.
programs, and
Go
like
ahead.
having the customers navigate and accessing those so
Okay.
that they're getting the bang for the buck would also be important as the kind of eventual recipients, but I'm comfortable with the time of use one as well.
So you would add that third bullet?
I would.
Okay.
And you?
Well, we can talk through it. So we've got authority over that here in our state energy office, and I know those rebates are coming. And so my thinking, Chair, you're delegated on that now, so your thinking would be excellent to hear. But my thinking was, we're gonna have to figure out how to get that out to everybody. And I do hope the utilities have a role in that, in helping their customers. I didn't know if we want to do that for MG&E or the three that happen to be in this year versus a more statewide approach that would figure out how the utilities can be partners and marketing support for Focus, as they are for the base Focus, but for the IRA. So I didn't know where to put that one, but I do think that the utilities have a role in that.
I think it's really important, as Commissioner Strand pointed out. My thought is once we get the dollars and we get the program up and running, that we'd be in a position to push out uniform language and ask all
Yeah,
utilities to use
help.
that language.
Yeah.
Just to try to control the message and be as helpful as possible.
Yeah, and since we talked about it and it's out there, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, super. Thank you for bringing that up. Okay, now we switch gears to gas rate issues in the natural gas utility that this applicant operates. Issues 47 and 48, similarly to electric, it's 2 different years looking at natural gas cost of service. In this particular case, there's just a cost of service A and B. And in that case, I am at alternative 2. I looked at both of those and used both of those, but did not adopt a specific model for either test year.
Agreed, all two.
I was at all 2 for both, thank you.
So moving ahead to issue 49, what's the appropriate natural gas revenue allocation? The final numbers will change slightly from what's on, in the decision matrix, but not a dramatic change from where staff was at with their audit. Similarly to electric, I thought that the staff proposal was a good balance, and it was a just and reasonable balance of the cost of service studies that were provided. So I'm at alternative 2.
I am as well.
I am, thank you. Alternative 2.
And issue 50 is the appropriate 2025 natural gas revenue allocation. I'm in the same spot. I thought the staff's, again, was a good, just and reasonable balance.
Agreed.
Alternative 2, thank you.
Issue 51, what is the appropriate overall natural gas rate design for 2024? I thought that staff, again, using their revenue allocation, dividing that down into the particular rates that each customer class would pay, I thought that the staff proposal is very similar to the applicant's, but I thought that the staff's was the preferred, so I'm at alt 2.
Agreed.
Alternative 2.
Issue 52, I'm at alt 2. This is the same question for 2025.
Agreed.
Yep, thank
Alternative
you.
2, okay. Issue 53 is what's the appropriate natural gas residential monthly fixed charge for 2024 and 2025, and our staff witness, Andrew Eider, put in testimony that would slightly lower this for the residential class, and I would adopt that, so I would be at alternative 1.
I would as well, alt 1.
Alternative 1.
And issue 54 is the same issue for small commercial customers, and similarly, I'm at alternative 1.
Agreed.
Alt 1, thank you.
And issue 55 is related to the applicant's proposal to create a new renewable natural gas tariff. So I think this is really interesting and exciting. Obviously, we heard voluminous testimony from, for example, municipalities that have strong sustainability plans, and clearly those customers are electric and natural gas customers, like the city of Middleton, city of Madison, and a number of corporate customers may be interested too. So I actually think that this is a good advancement for MG&E in particular to offer such a tariff. I thought that the idea that CUB proposed, again, just working with staff on the marketing information is appropriate, especially for this early pilot. So I would be at whatever we want to call it, alt 1 or alt 2, but supporting the program, just having them work with staff on the marketing language.
I'm in the same spot.
I am as well, thank you.
Okay, issue 56 is the applicant's proposal to close the large commercial and industrial demand-based distribution service. Reasonable, they have no customers on this program, or on this tariff, excuse me, so I'm at alternative 1. I'm fine with closing it.
Agreed, alt 1.
Alt 1.
Okay. So that sends us back to issue 42, and then we'll take that up with issue 57. So issue 42 was related to customer assistance payments program. There was a lot of testimony presented by interveners on the need for customer programs to address the challenges faced by low and middle income customers on the residential side in particular. As you noted, Chair, the cost of service is impactful not just to residential customers, but it can be acutely impactful on customers that have very low incomes or moderate incomes. So the applicant had proposed a specific program that they called the ECAP, and then skipping to issue 57, the intervener BPSA proposed 3 specific programs, a percentage of income plan, an arrearage management plan, and a targeted energy efficiency plan. To me, I kind of looked at all of these together in my mind. And I'd love to pass it to you, Chair, if you're willing to kind of give your thoughts on the collective testimony that we saw in this case.
Okay. I'll get to the bottom line. I don't think the ECAP plan gets near close enough to the issue that it is aiming to solve. I didn't think that it was well thought out. And I think I found Roger Colton's testimony to be extremely helpful and extremely persuasive. I think he indicated that this ECAP proposal is sort of like putting a Band-Aid on a larger wound, and that I think as a general matter, we're missing the mark when it comes to talking about plans like this ECAP. And I think we all would be better served to start paying more attention to and adding resources at customer behavior. And I think what we have seen here at the commission in the past is that you can effectuate positive customer payment behavior when you work with your customers. And when, in particular, you have an arrearage management plan. And we have arrearage management plans for other customers. I worked on the low-income pilot program when I worked for a utility. That was more than 20 years ago. And that program recognizes that simply giving somebody $6 a month isn't getting to the root of the problem. And the problem is in low to moderate income families and in businesses, quite frankly, that are struggling. The decision on where to put their limited resources and how it impacts their payment behavior. If data proves that if you can get customers off of that proverbial arrearage wheel, that they are then set up in a better position to pay more each month. The $6 a month isn't going to help. It just isn't. It's a drop in the ocean. And so I don't think that this program is reasonable. I think we're looking at this the wrong way. And I would actually pull out all of these proposals and I would put them into a standalone docket, much like we did with We Energies. And we ordered them to relook at the LIFT program. I think that's what we need to do. Because I think we are all talking past each other. And I think, as I indicated at the outset, customers of all classes are saying enough is enough. And we need better, more effective tools to help mitigate and manage customer bills. We hear it from large manufacturers all the time that their energy costs are the single largest cost that they have in running their business. It's the same when you talk about commercial or residential customers, whether they are low to moderate income, middle income, or high income. So I actually would only direct the creation of an arrearage management program for this utility. And then I would require, in addition to doing the arrearage management program, I would require a standalone docket almost exactly like we did in the We Energies case. And I would bring the interested parties to the table. It's apparent to me that not a lot of stakeholder engagement was done in this case. And so I think that that could also help inform the creation of a program, if that is the end result. But it appears to me through all of the testimony that we received that lines are getting crossed and people are talking past each other. And I just think that if we do two things, order an arrearage management program, which has been proven to be effective in creating positive payment behavior, which also benefits the utility, by the way, right? Because if they're getting more dollars in on a monthly basis, that helps their revenue. So I think I would order an arrearage management plan, and then I would order that a standalone docket be opened to examine affordability, and I would include an energy burden analysis. Whatever comes out of that, I don't know. My understanding is that for the WEC utilities, that those conversations have been productive, but we don't have an end product. I also think it is dangerous to use a one-size-fits-all approach when we're talking about the issues of energy burden and affordability, because all utilities have different customer bases that look and act very differently. And so I think that this isn't a situation where we can open up a generic and sort of solve the problem. But I do think that the chorus of voices has gotten to be so loud, and again, has been so consistent across all classes, that it is time to take a very deliberate approach to figuring out how we're going to get at affordability. Because as near as I can tell, when I look at the queue, 2024 is not going to be short on construction requests. So this isn't something that's a one and done, that it's going to go away. I think that we have to have difficult conversations. And so as it relates to this bundle of proposals, I would require an arrearage management plan. I would not authorize the ECAP. And then the geo-targeted and the percentage of income, I would not authorize those or direct those. Again, as I said at the outset, we have a very specific statutory structure that we reside within in the state of Wisconsin. And while some of these programs may work in other states, it's really important to consider the statutory framework in those states. And so I would not authorize the PIP or the geo-targeted program.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for all those remarks, Chair. I was in the same spot, that I would not authorize the ECAP. I did not find the specific cost to be based on any specific evidence that it was going to change anything or provide an outcome, right? There was not a lot of metrics about specifically what this was going to test to solve. And I would agree with you that of the three proposals, the arrearage management is the one that we've seen recent success with some of our utilities. And would you, I don't know that we need to go down this road, but they would need to file that in a TD docket, and we would
Yes.
work on the specifics of how that would be orchestrated. And they would need to show us how the arrearage management program is going to benefit customers, as we've seen. The other utilities have shown us examples, and then when they've come back, they've shown us how it's actually working. So
Right.
not the specific BPSA proposal, but we would ask for a TE docket.
Correct. And
on
recall that we have received.
TU. Okay, thank
We have received an arrearage management program proposal that we rejected, and we sent it back, and we asked for more information because
Right.
we didn't feel that we had the right data to support it. So I think Cindy said it's a TU docket.
Right, we can hear
Yeah.
from Commissioner Stern, and I do have a couple of clarifying or follow-up questions, just so we're clear what you would like to see done in connection with this issue as well
Okay.
as 57.
Okay. Well, first, thank you. I appreciate the comments and the discussion. I think these are very important issues. I agree. I'm in total agreement. I think the reactions to the ECAP program were lukewarm at best. Of the four, I think it's absolutely necessary to have them figure out an AMP situation. So I'm in support of that. And then I agree with your comments regarding geo-targeting and PIP and just the statutory framework we're working within right now. I think that it's important to see how these proposals, when, depending on the work that can be done, will benefit customers directly, and we just didn't have that here.
Yeah.
So Cindy, I'm happy to help clarify any of those questions, but I
Sure,
think we're
so-
all in agreement.
With regard to the AMP, that would be an applicant filing. I didn't know if you wanted to put a specific date on that, if that was expected to be in 2024, or whether you were looking for that in their next rate case. That's my first question. My second question, somewhat similar, relating to the investigation, the TU docket, in how we handled it previously, was that the commission directed staff and the applicants to kind of work together to develop alternative low-income assistance programs. There was some specific reference to specific programs, and to open and investigate the development of such programs. And then that was initiated by the commission staff, who there was some dialogue, but we opened a docket, and again, you had a date certain for both of those. It was tied to an April date to at least give some post-rate case time for discussion. So those would be my two questions. And
So I was gonna
don't know if
say
staff has
April.
others. Okay?
I was going to say April. April's fine? Okay. I would be fine with
April
April, a
1,
filing
or
by
whatever.
April. And I would largely mimic
Okay.
that language.
Okay.
Good?
All right, good.
So it's two separate
So yes, there
dockets,
would be
potentially,
one that would be
AMP.
an AMP docket. I think that would also be a TU, because it would be arrears management for the gas and electric by, we'll just pick whatever the first weekday in April is, 2024. The second would be a TU, but wouldn't specify a program. It would be an investigation. It would be developed in there, and then if a specific program does come out of that, then there would be a specific filing to that program, depending on what happens in that docket.
Yep.
But a specific authorization, that would need to come back for a specific authorization from the commission.
Right. And I would not limit
Oh,
it.
yeah, sorry, that would be a UI docket, not a TU, because we wouldn't be, we'd be investigating various
Oh,
low
right.
income. And then if a proposal comes out of that, then that would be a TETG or a TU if it,
Yep. And I would not limit it to one particular class of customers. I know that I've completely now taken over WEG's catchphrase of rate moderation. I think that's what we're talking about. We're talking about effective ways to moderate rates. So I wouldn't be as specific as it can only relate to
Just
low income.
customer
I think customer affordability and rate moderation.
and
Thanks,
that
WEG.
that notice will come back to you, so if you don't like how it is, but I think we have that direction, and we at least know part of the scope then is also to, per your comments, look at energy burden.
Yes.
In connection with that, again, for all customers.
Yep. Good,
I agree with that, and I have one more comment to make,
okay,
but it's not changing that at all.
okay.
My comment would be based on my backgrounds coming from doing a lot of work on energy efficiency in various places. I mean, there are some new innovative programs that utilities are running. Electric co-ops have run them, and now like Duke Energy, Missouri's commission is ordering all the utilities to offer these programs, working with customers, trying to figure out actually how to fix the housing stock and get more energy efficiency done. Because the record, I think, was also clear, you know, we can't ask, going back to residential, like a low-income household to put $10,000 of insulation in their house, right? And you can't have it for renters because you got this split incentive. So there's some very specific problems and challenges out there that there's a lot of solutions out there. So I think those are some of the ideas, and we have another docket on performance rate making. We've talked about demand response and energy efficiency within that. I know there's more work coming on that in the future, so there may be some linkages to work that's already started and work that other utilities, large investor-owned utilities, are doing that we can build on in Wisconsin. So I just want to throw that out there for the parties to be thinking about as they look at what can work here.
Yeah, there are a lot, just to piggyback on that, there are a lot of really innovative programs coming out from companies like Southern, Constellation. They're
Yep.
pretty impressive.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
Cindy, are you good?
Yeah, we'll take a short break just as we review our notes, and I'll just make sure we have everything we need.
Okay. Good for issue 58, though? Okay. Issue 58 is what, if any, additional action is appropriate for the commission to take based on evidence in the record. A number of other issues were raised, rejecting the rate increase outright, provide additional data on energy burden, adopting certain things. I think we've discussed most of these. I think that there's more work to do. And so I'm at Alt 2 for this specific item, but I think some of the work to come on rate affordability is welcome, so.
Right. I think what we just decided on the UI docket captures that high energy burden, an energy burden analysis that CUB and 350 Wisconsin brought up as well. So I'm also at Alt 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I am as well, thank you.
Okay. And issue 59 is should the commission include the standard order conditions from the rate case, the previous rate case, 3270 UR 124, along with standard order conditions. I read through all these. I didn't have any changes, so I'm at alternative 1.
I am as well.
Alternative 1, thank you.
I know we have cost allocation and whether that's a separate docket. And so if we want to take a short break, and
Is
I
that
would like
issue
to get
33?
Yes.
I'd like to just
Issue 33.
Yeah.
get a little input from staff on that, and then anything else you want to clean
Yeah,
up with
then
staff.
we'll just take a break.
Yeah.
Give us 15 minutes to just, one, talk to you, Commissioner, and then just make sure we have what we need for the balance of the decisional items.
Okay.
So 15 minutes.
Thank you.
Okay, we're back from our break.
All right, thank you, Commissioners, for that opportunity to just talk with staff and review our notes. We have a couple of cleanup items, one that you had identified, and then I have just two that staff requests some clarification on. The first that you asked for was issue 33, which is it reasonable for the commission to open an investigation into electric cost allocation and rate design? And the question was whether or not the right process for that. Staff's recommendation would be that we just create a new docket for that and open that, if that would be acceptable to you.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's, I think there was enough principles in here, and we can work through the scoping of it to get the answers we're looking for.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and
So that's alt 1.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
And then, again, not to preview, but I assume that similar with other broader investigations, that may start with a scoping memo where we might identify some things after we talk with the parties. There's a lot to bite off. We heard from you, a need to perhaps not only examine the current models that we're using, but also the different types of models that may need to be used. So we can convene a meeting of those parties once we get the notice open, and then we'd present sort of a scoping memorandum and work on bringing that back to you all. The next item, kind of somewhat related, that staff had, was on issue 39D. And what your intent was there. As you know, we have the open 5EI 157, which has a broader net metering scope. And we understood that you were certainly interested in seeing the conducting a cost-benefit analysis and/or conducting a value or solar. But there are maybe other items, and I didn't know that you were intending, given you were putting it in that net metering generic docket, to be that that's the only thing, or would it make more sense to provide something like including but not limited to, so directing further investigation in 157 on net metering, including but not limited to these topics?
Yeah.
Yeah, my intent that it would be broader.
Right.
Even if, a scoping scenario like you just outlined for 33 would be appropriate for here, I would be supportive of that. Just to make sure we're capturing what we're
Yeah.
looking for and giving proper direction.
That'd be
Yeah.
acceptable?
I think that's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And our last staff follow-up item related to your direction for the applicant to file an AMP. In just reviewing past filings, appreciate wanting to set a deadline, but if the applicant hasn't started, it may take them a little bit longer than April 1 to file that. We appreciate, I think, that you wanted it clearly sometimes in 2024.
Yes.
I just didn't know if April 1, given the work that would go into preparing it and making sure that you have one that has enough meat on the bones, whether you might want to consider a more flexible deadline or maybe give a little bit more time to develop.
Is there a recommendation? I mean, June, is June better? I mean, obviously, June is better.
June is better, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they have already started thinking about an AMP and maybe they do it sooner. You could say a no later,
No
Dan,
later
or
than.
you could just say 2024.
No,
and-
not that.
Okay, so then a no later than
I would
date?
do no later than June 1st.
Okay.
I can support that.
And I believe that takes care of all of staff's questions. Yes. And do you want to see, I assume you want to see the order come back?
Yes, I would like to see the order come back.
Okay, I think that does it.
Good.
A motion?
In docket 3270 UR 125, I move we approve the MG application to adjust rates for 2024 and 2025 consistent with our discussion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that concludes our official business for today. The next open meeting is scheduled for Thursday, November 9th, 2023 at 10:30 a.m.
I move we stand adjourned until Thursday, November 9th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.